Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am so excited today because my guest is going to be talking to us about things that are important for not just business owners, but business people. And let's be honest, every person, because we're going to be talking about several very important subjects. So please join me in welcoming Christian Espinosa to our program today. Welcome, Christian. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Deb.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Christian Espinosa is the best-selling author of The Smartest Person in the Room. He is also an entrepreneur and founder of Blue Goat Cyber. He's a white hat hacker, a certified high-performance coach, and a lover of heavy metal music and spicy food. He's also an Air Force veteran. Thank you so much for your service, sir. And an Ironman triathlete. Christian used to value being the smartest person in the room until he realized that his greatest contribution to humanity, leadership, and the fight against cybercrime is his ability to bring awareness and simple solutions to challenges associated with high IQ, low EQ staff. So again, Christian, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the awesome intro as well.
I love it. I love it. And again, as I said, thank you so much for your service. And I'm always so thrilled as a Colorado native seeing someone who went to the Air Force Academy because, I've been to the other military academies. They're nice, but nothing beats that Air Force Academy. I mean, it is just absolutely gorgeous. And of course, puts out leaders that are phenomenal. So, Christian, I always like to find out from my guests how they got to where they are today, because you've had a fabulous journey. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. I started out, I'll kind of give a brief synopsis. I grew up in a very chaotic environment, very poor on welfare, food stamps, WIC, which is government cheese, and powdered milk, with a prescription drug addicted mother. And I wanted to get out of my environment, so I applied to all the military academies and basically every scholarship I could apply to or apply for. And I got accepted to all the academies, but I chose to go to the Air Force Academy. So then after there, I spent about 6 years active duty doing communications in the military. I wanted to fly, but there's a bunch of cutbacks when I graduated in pilot slots. So I did communications. Then I became a defense contractor for a while, basically traded my Air Force uniform for civilian uniform and doing the same sort of job. And then I did some commercial work after that. And my whole career has been in communications with an emphasis on cybersecurity. And when I was doing the commercial work, I was working for a company. I was a VP of a company. And I had like a defining moment where I had the CEO and I weren't seeing eye to eye. And it was causing me a lot of mental stress and anxiety and draining my emotions. So I decided to quit without another job lined up. And that's the first time I've ever done that. But that forced me to look at my contacts. And I thought, you know what? I'll try freelance work. So I did freelance work for about 5 years. I taught cybersecurity classes all over the world. Probably I taught 10 to 15,000 different students. I did white hat hacking, which you mentioned in my bio. And then I kind of got bored with the consulting or freelance work. So I thought I'll start a company. So I started Alpine Security in the end of 2014. And I grew that company. I had 16 employees at one time, and I sold that in December of 2020. And that through that journey with Alpine Security is where I decided to write my book, The Smartest Person in the Room, because I realized that all of my problems in my company, like 99.9% of the problems, were not because somebody didn't have the technical skills. It was because they lacked the interpersonal skills or the emotional intelligence. So I worked hard to fix that in my organization. And I realized that that is a a major gap in cybersecurity and other high-tech industries. And then after I sold the company, I worked for the parent company. They're a publicly traded company with a ticker symbol CISO. I worked for them until June. I left in June. I've been doing real estate investing since June of 2022. And then I launched my new cybersecurity company called Blue Goat Cyber in this month, in early 2023.
Oh, cool. So it is just hot off the press.
It is, yes.
Very cool. Well, it did make me wonder, why Blue Goat? Where does that name come from?
Well, my last company was called Alpine Security. So I like the mountains. I like to do mountaineering. And whenever I go on hikes or in the mountains, you often see goats.
Right.
And goats are very resilient, very persistent, very stubborn. And they're always trying to climb something with agility. You see pictures of goats like on these very peculiar
and you're
places
thinking,
up
what
in trees.
the heck?
Yeah, exactly. So and I like the color blue. That's my favorite color. So I thought I might as well combine the goat with blue, and there's Blue Goat Cyber. Yeah,
I love it. Very cool. And I was like, okay, goat as in greatest of all time. Could be. You know, like you said, you just launched, but yeah, I want to talk first about cybercrime. Because we hear about it in the news all the time. We hear about malware. We hear about ransomware, all of those various things. And of course, we hear about them when they hit the big companies. For somebody like me, and many of the people who listen to us are very small business owners, should we even be concerned about cybercrime? And, you know, can't we just buy, you know, some of that software and put it on our machine? Is that going to work?
You absolutely should be concerned about cybercrime, especially small to medium-sized businesses. A lot of larger companies, even though that's the ones we typically hear about, a lot of them have staff dedicated to protect their environment, like you know, cyber defenders or cyber operators or people that are defending their environment. Whereas small companies, it's often someone's alternate duty, or they don't have somebody.
They're so like me going,
yeah, exactly. And the cyber criminals don't really care which environment they get into, as long as there's a way for them to make money. And that typically is from stealing client data or electronic medical records. So if you have client data in your small business and the company can steal your data, there's a way for them to potentially make money, or they can install ransomware and there's a way for you to have to, you know, pay to get the ransomware removed. And a lot of small businesses have actually gone out of business because they don't realize how many client records they have. But if a hacker steals your client data, you're obligated to pay for credit monitoring for all of those stolen records. And those fees alone can take a small business out of business, because a lot of small businesses have pretty thin margins and they don't have a lot of room for paying $500,000 or something in credit monitoring fees.
Well, and you know, it is one of those things, as I said, that we hear a lot about. But are there just, you know, and are there some basic, you know, and we all know that don't click the link if you don't know where it's from, you know, those type of things. But what are some basics that everybody should be doing?
I would say 3 basic things. Number one, the way most attackers get into your environment is a vulnerability or misconfiguration.
Okay.
So the first thing is to make sure you update the software on all of your systems. And that includes the operating system. So if it's Windows, it includes updating that, as well as the application. So if you have Office installed, WhatsApp, or, you know, any other applications, you need to update those as well, because all of those are ways an attacker can get in. And then in addition to that, the configuration, you need to check the configuration to make sure it's not like the default settings. The default settings are typically sort of wide open versus secure. The second thing is multi-factor authentication. A lot of us use Office 365. You can enable that in Office 365. So somebody is able to get your password. It doesn't matter because they don't have the second factor of authentication,
your
which
phone
is
number
your phone.
or something.
Right. And that's relatively simple to implement, because, you know, if you do that, it mitigates a lot of the risk. If somebody gets your password to your email,
Mhm.
That's sort of the keys to the kingdom, because they can go through and reset all your passwords for everything
Right.
else on the cloud.
Mhm.
So you want to avoid that at all circumstances. And the third thing is with phishing emails, because that's
Mhm.
still the most common vector attackers get in, is to, despite how curious you are about clicking on that link, or this
You
fax you
mean that
got, or this
person that
money you
I've
got.
never heard of isn't giving me $500 million?
Yeah, don't do it, because they play on curiosity and urgency. They want to give you a sense of urgency. You have to do something very quickly, or you'll lose the opportunity. Just avoid that. Even LinkedIn invitations, like when I did white hat hacking, we would send people bogus LinkedIn invitations. So if they clicked on a link, it would infect their computer. So if you receive something like that, it's much better to go to the actual application, like LinkedIn.com, versus click on a link.
Right.
So just be cognizant of that.
Yeah. And we hear things like, IRS is never, they will only communicate with you and on mail. They send you printed things. So if you get a link from an email saying, hey, we're the IRS, no. And it really is, in many cases, it's funny. I had a teacher long ago that taught us there's no such thing as a free lunch. And the whole thing of, if it's too good to be true, it is. And I see people doing that all the time, especially on, say, Facebook, where they're, hey, if you share this post, you can win an RV or whatever. And every once in a while, stuff like that really is true. But I always tell people, just do a little research, and especially on your email, it's very easy to look to see who it is coming from, and that's one of the easiest things. I mean, I got one the other day that was, hey, we've done your annual renewal, which now is the time of year that you get a lot of those, right? And it said for $540. I thought, now that doesn't sound right. I don't do anything that's $540. But it was click here to confirm. Right. Now, if they'd done 40, I might have clicked there. But of course, the next thing I did was I looked to see who it was from, and it was from, Hoogity Boogity at, this totally random email address. So clearly not a company that I was going to trust. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that is just, but we all fall for it, right? Every once in a while we click that thing. So, it's just, you just need to be on the alert, folks.
Definitely. The attackers are going to get in. The odds are stacked against us. It just takes one click.
Well, and I have this discussion with people all the time. It's like, okay, how do people fall for it? Where clearly they're falling for it, or they wouldn't continue trying that. They have obviously gotten a lot smarter. I mean, when I get an email that has grammatical errors and all sorts of things like that, I'm like, no, this is not from a business. But I always say, just think if they put all of that knowledge, that skill to good, just think what they could be doing, which is obviously what a white hat hacker is. You're the person who goes in and tries to stop things like that.
Yeah, white hat hacker. We emulate the black hat hackers, which are the bad guys, by using the same tactics, or very similar tactics that they use to try to break into an environment. So we're an ally that breaks into a company's environment and tells them how we got in, so they can fix the holes. Exactly. It proves that the vulnerabilities are there, because a lot of people say that they're secure, they've done X, Y, and Z, but until you've been tested, you don't actually know if those things are working. And that's where we come into play. Right.
And obviously there are companies who like we said, everybody must be concerned about this, but companies that have a lot of, as you said, client data have really got to pay attention to this. Medical, financial, anything like that, where you've got information that can be used to compromise someone else, you absolutely have to be paying attention to your cybersecurity.
Definitely. That's the data the attackers want, because they can resell that client data on the black market and make money off of it, because they're in business to make money, not just to hack you for no reason. This is their livelihood. So they take it very seriously, and the more money they can make, just like somebody in business, we try to grow our business, they're trying to grow their business. It just happens to be, through a nefarious activity.
That's true. They are in business. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, they clearly wouldn't do it if it wasn't making money for them.
Mhm.
But and speaking of IRS, I'm pretty sure they're not reporting what they make to the IRS,
Probably
right?
not.
That'd be pretty funny. But maybe it could be back to the old Al Capone thing. That's how they find these folks, is the IRS goes after them.
Yeah, similar. I think a lot of traditional organized crime
Mhm.
has migrated to doing
Mhm.
cybercrime because it's more lucrative. The
Mhm.
chances of getting caught are way less.
Right.
There's less effort involved, so
Mhm.
there's greater return on the investment.
Mhm.
And if you do it through different jurisdictions, the chance of you getting caught is pretty slim
Mhm.
because a lot of countries don't like each other.
Mhm.
So if I'm in the US, but I route my attack through Hong Kong,
Mhm.
Iceland, Singapore,
Mhm.
and it come back to the US, then the US has to go through all those other countries to
Mhm.
realize where it actually came from.
Right.
And those are all, and everybody has different privacy rules and things like
Mhm.
that. So it makes it very challenging to actually track down who did something.
Mhm. Well, and let's be honest, if it's $1,000, they're going to say, "Oh, so sorry." If it's millions of dollars, then the effort will be put forth to try and track down what happened. And
Right.
so of course the smart thing is to go for a whole bunch of the smaller ones that nobody ever flags.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that we always hear are, people, especially seniors, who have something, or the vulnerable people. There was a story on the news the other day about a man who confessed finally to his son, to his adult son. He was an older gentleman, that he had given every penny he had to a woman who contacted him on social media,
Mm.
and she played the game very well. Clearly she knew what she was doing. Now they were able to track her back down and arrest her, but most of the time those things go unreported because the people are so embarrassed that they got
Yeah.
taken advantage of.
Yeah, definitely. It's we don't. None of us like to be scammed, or we
Mhm.
feel almost guilty if we fall
Mhm.
vulnerable to one of these scams,
Right.
especially if it involves some sort of online dating or something
Mhm.
like that, where we meet
Right.
somebody, and it's a common thing where you have a female that likes you or a man that likes you, but you don't even know if they're really a female or man. They won't ever send you a
Mhm.
picture.
Right.
But they're in a bind and ask you for money, and
Mhm.
pretty soon it kind of escalates from there.
Mhm.
And these people are very good at human
Mhm.
behavior in psychology
Right.
and neurolinguistic programming and
Mhm.
manipulating our weaknesses. So it's a challenging situation to be in.
Mhm. Right. So, from a small business perspective, we talked about some of the stuff. Are some of the softwares, things like that, are those good things to have on our computers?
You absolutely need some sort of anti-malware software. If you're running Microsoft, it comes with anti-malware software, which is adequate.
Mhm.
If you're running a different operating system, you may want to install some
Mhm.
anti-malware software, and that includes something for your phone. A lot of people ignore the phone, but your phone
I do.
is an operating system. Yeah,
Mhm.
so you should have like Lookout or some anti-malware on your phone as
Okay.
well, because any app you download from the Play
Mhm.
Store or from Apple iTunes may have a vulnerability in it or may be malicious.
Mhm.
So you just need to be careful with the applications. So one of the things a
Mhm.
lot of people don't realize on on your phone as well is if you notice when you install an application, it asks for all these permissions.
Right.
But if the application is something like where you keep notes or something, for instance, it doesn't
Mhm.
need access to your
It
camera
doesn't.
or
Yeah.
your
Mhm.
audio,
Mhm.
but that's just a way. So if somebody attacks your system and there's a vulnerability in the application,
Mhm.
now they have access to your audio and your video, so they can turn
Mhm.
the mic on your phone and record
Mhm.
everything you're saying and send it
Mhm.
somewhere. There's all kinds of vectors that people
Mhm.
don't really think about.
Right. And same with your desktop systems. I do laugh, when people are like, "Oh, they're gonna turn my camera on." If they turned my camera on, they would die of boredom. I mean, they'd very quickly, she's not doing anything. But yeah, it is just kind of weird that, and clearly there have been con men and con women since, and that's in essence what a lot of this is. Since whenever we've just made it easier with our technology. When we think it should be more difficult, we've actually made it easier.
Yeah, and the camera one reminds me, like, if I were a black hat hacker, the tactic I would use would be to get access to someone's username and password. So pretty much, if your username and password were stolen from a major data breach, they're going to be on the dark web somewhere. So you can find that. Then you can create an email campaign, which people have done, where you put the username you already have, it's your email address, but you put the password in the subject line of the person. A lot of people use the same password on almost everything. So then you send them an email with their password and you ask them to pay you money, because you sort of like blackmail them. You say you turn the camera on, you have evidence of them doing weird things, of evidence of them having an affair, whatever, and you ask for money for that. So people freak out because they see their real password in the subject, and they're like,
so they must have all that information.
Yeah. And they don't realize that they got it from a previous breach on the dark web. And a lot of people will pay rather than, deal with the potential of them releasing this information. So it's an easy way to make a lot of money, because if you can get, 100,000 usernames and passwords and send an email campaign and 5% fall for it, that's a lot of people. And if you ask for, a few $100s each, that's a lot of money in a short amount of time.
Right. Yeah, I remember I got one of those one time, and of course, first thing I did was I went through and changed every password. But and I use LastPass, which is one of those things. But but it said, we saw you watching pornography on your computer, and I'm thinking, well, since I don't do that, clearly, clearly they don't know who I am. Now they might, look at track in the background and go, oh, look at that. But yeah, there's nothing. And I guess it's, that's kind of, it goes back to, when we're in school, if you're not doing anything bad, then people can't blackmail you about it. Right.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And you brought up a good point about a password manager like LastPass. I mean, LastPass has been compromised. A lot of people have moved to like
I know. I got that email. I'm like, well, crud.
Right. So all of your passwords are like leaked now. But a password manager and using a different password as much as possible in every web application is ideal. That way, if somebody does steal one of your passwords or gets access to it, they don't have access to everything.
Right. And let's be honest, we're lazy. And I'm raising my hand on this one. We pick the same passwords. We use the public Wi-Fis. We do all of those things that we're told not to do. And most of us, by the grace of God, are okay. We get lucky. Let's just put it that way. And so it's not all that difficult, folks, to make sure that luck's not really playing a part of this.
Yeah, it's all about managing risk, really, and getting it to an acceptable level for you. Like, I use public Wi-Fi, but almost everything I use is encrypted, or I use a VPN. So I'm not too worried about it. But, if your system is vulnerable and you use public Wi-Fi and you're not using encrypted applications or VPN, that just makes your risk a little bit higher.
Right. And I also like the people who, we don't do any of that. Okay. Then fine. That actually is probably the best way to protect yourself. But it is still, it just takes some reasonable steps. Some of it is just as simple as doing things like, say, like setting, and I know this happened because this happened to a friend of mine. Their bank account was compromised because they had never set up electronic banking. And so someone went in and set it up for them. It was, and so we were able to stop it really pretty quickly. But, but yeah, even though they never wanted to use electronic banking, they should have set it up. And again, like you said, with that 2-factor authentication, because nobody else could have done it either. You could still be trotting your little self down to the bank to do whatever you wanted to do. But, just kind of give people a reason to go, okay, a little bit longer to work, then we're going to go to the next person.
Exactly. Right. It's a return on investment. So if you're, it's like a burglar trying to break in a car. If your car is locked and alarm, they're probably going to go to the next one. It's unlocked without an alarm. It's the same thing with cybercrime.
Right. Yeah. So cool. Well, Christian, as you mentioned, you wrote this book called The Smartest Person in the Room because of who you work with, and how to help people to communicate better, to improve their people skills, all those things. Of course, we all have the stereotype of the person in our mind, the IT person who's the little nerdy person who, never talks to people, has, like you said, bad interpersonal skills, things like that.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things. So tell us a little bit more about the book, and then we're really going to delve into it because it's got so many great points.
You mentioned the stereotype of the IT people that lack interpersonal skills. I believe that part of the reason we have this challenge, which I had in my company, the super high IQ or rationally intelligent individuals that are lacking the emotional intelligence, is because we've sort of accepted this as commonplace for so long.
Right.
And I'm a believer that you get what you tolerate. So if we accept this, we're going to get more of it. So in my company, Alpine Security, what I realized is most of the problems I had, like 99.9% of them, were not because somebody lacked technical skills. It was because they lacked people skills.
Right.
And
clearly, they're extremely intelligent people.
Yes. Yeah. They're like the brightest of the brightest, like the best penetration testers or white hat hackers, super brilliant minds. But when they're talking to a client, for instance, going over a report, and they're talking over the client's head, and the client doesn't understand what they're saying, then it's a disservice to the client, because if they don't understand the risk we're communicating or how to fix it, they're not going to get better. And then internally, my team was having challenges collaborating because each person wanted to be smarter than somebody else. And I believe as humans, we all want to feel significant. And in high-tech industries or with engineers, typically we get that significance by being, quote, smarter than somebody else.
You really want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, and that's like an obtuse thing. Like, how do you measure if you're smarter than somebody, and on what subject? Because there's a lot of different things, right? But that's what I work to fix in my company. So in my company, every week we have emotional intelligence training, people skills training, a little bit of neurolinguistic programming training, just different things to make sure my team's EQ skills went up. Because I believe if you have super high IQ and you combine that with a high EQ, that glass ceiling you're probably under, if you only have a high IQ, is removed, and you can go much further in your career.
Right. And we like I said, we all have that stereotype in our minds. And one of my favorite TV shows, and it still is on every once in a while, so I watch it, is the series Scorpion, where it's they were extremely high IQ people, and they each had their own little things. But you did have the cyber guy, but they all argue at various points during the TV series about who is the smartest person in the room. And of course they all have very bad interpersonal skills, because they're so busy trying to show that they're the smartest person in the room that they never stop to think about the other people, and so it is, and we all want to be giving that information. I mean, especially if we're being paid to give that information, to be that consultant and those things. But we totally forget, and that we have to be providing it and connecting with people in a way where it works together as that team, because they might pay us to do that project, but if we didn't work well with them, they're not going to pay us again.
That's right. And that's a very good point, because I noticed after I fixed we improved a lot of the emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills in my company, a lot of our clients went from like a single project to a yearly contract or long-term clients, because people want to feel understood and appreciated, especially if they're dealing with a company or anybody really. And if they are left feeling misunderstood and unappreciated, they're probably going to go somewhere else. And that was something that I had to really focus on in my company, because I believe that in cybersecurity with a company, there's a lot of people that can provide a service or transactional based service where they do something and send you a report, but I wanted to provide an experience where people feel valued and understood and appreciated and want to work with us on a continuous basis. Because I believe that's more important than a transaction.
Right. And we all fall into that trap, of just wanting to give them the information. And like a client will ask me something, and a lot of times my first response will be, well, it's not done that way, or that's not possible. Right. And okay, but what needs to follow is the why. That's not possible because, or it is possible, but we would have to do this, and of course the big thing is, well, that takes time. Oh, why do I have to do that? And then we're thinking, well, they should know that. Right. And I mean, like, I saw somebody posted something on Facebook the other day, and I'm like, don't they know that that's not right? And I thought, well, clearly not.
That's a good indicator.
But of course, my first instinct was just to post, and we really did just, and I'm sure, I'm hoping I wasn't the only one, because, that really made me the schmuck to not just want to say, you idiot. But, instead we should, and you want to explain it like they don't know. Now, we don't want to also be explaining it like they're 6 years old, because that's the other trap that we fall into when we start trying to explain stuff, is, we dumb it down too much.
Or if you have the interpersonal skills and you're having a Zoom meeting, you can tell by their reaction if they're getting it or not. So you can, increase the speed you're explaining it, or decrease the speed, or dumb it down, as you said, or whatever, to where they're understanding it. Because it's about connecting and making sure somebody is getting the message.
Right.
Because I'm a believer that in my book, I talk a lot about neuro-linguistic programming. And one of the presuppositions is that the meaning of communication is the response you get. So if you keep that in mind when you're communicating with somebody, it shifts the ownership on you to alter how you're communicating, to make sure the other person receives the message.
Right. And in your book, one of the things you talk about is that we get so much from someone's body language and things like that. And of course, Zoom now makes that very difficult. We're not seeing that they're tapping their pencil or, jiggling their foot in annoyance, things like that. We're only getting, this little box of a person. So, how do we counteract that? Because it's the majority. I mean, I'm drawing a blank. It's less than 10% actually comes from what someone says. So how do we counteract this? Gee, we're talking to them on a screen type of thing. And we are only seeing a very small part of them.
Right. I think the first step, you're right, Zoom is not as good as in person, obviously, but it's better than no video.
Right.
Like with my company, with Alpine Security, and with any company I have moving forward, it's mandatory you're on camera if you're in a meeting.
Okay.
A lot of companies, though, will have nobody on camera, so you really can't tell anything.
You're talking to the squares, right? That's got their name. You're like, are you even there?
Know if
Have
they're
you
there.
wandered off?
They could be like they could be washing the dishes or walking the dog or whatever, right? So I think, the first step is to make sure everyone's on camera, because I realize we've migrated to this remote world. And the best thing you could do is, look at their face or some of their hand gestures, which is not as good as you said if someone's tapping their foot or they're irritated, but you can glean a lot from someone's facial expressions. But it's not, that's the best we can do remote right now. But it's important to have the camera on, make people have it on, make people be present in a meeting, and conduct meetings in a manner where there's an agenda, they're on time, there's actually an outcome, they're outcome focused. So you're not wasting people's time either.
Right. And we're 2+ years into the pandemic, actually getting ready to start year 3, and it's so Zoom is going to be the way of life. Might be a different platform, but doing communication like that. And so the people who say, oh, I don't have a good camera, I've got a bad background, yada yada. I'm sorry, folks, those days are gone. And it's time. More than anything, I always remind them it needs to be professional. maybe you don't have a fancy background behind you because your home office might be in your bedroom. Okay, put up a screen.
Yeah.
There are ways. Have your camera at the right angle. I mean, I have done interviews with people where I've been talking to their ear because they don't have the camera, and I'm like, you can see what I see right now. I don't ever call them out. I just would not do that. But I'm like, I'm guessing the people watching this don't want to see your ear either. They also don't want to be looking up your nose or at the ceiling fan or all of these various things. And to me, of course, that does show that he's part of that whole communications process. Because when I see somebody that's not taking something that basic into account, I do wonder how professional they are. Do they not care that I'm looking at their ceiling fan the whole time? Well, maybe then they're not going to do really good work or things like that. So it is just kind of one of those weird things. This is life now, folks. Get used to it and step it up if you need to.
Yeah, that you bring up a lot of good points. With my company, Alpine Security, we have been doing remote work since 2014, before the pandemic, and we did a lot of etiquette training on Zoom, like you said, like having a professional background, putting on a decent shirt, not having a shirt with profanity on it.
Right. Having a shirt on. Hello.
Yeah. Having a shirt on. Yeah. Trying to be eye level with the camera because you don't want to be looking up someone's nose and you don't want them to be looking up. There's some things that you can do that marginally will improve the experience. Having a decent mic. Like me, I'm out of town right now, so I don't have my normal mic, but I think my mic is okay.
It's fine.
My background is, the best I could find in this situation. But, like the ceiling fans, like you mentioned, are annoying. The other thing from a security perspective is a lot of people I've noticed would have things like a whiteboard in the background with confidential information,
proprietary data.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to have that. And then a lot of people will share their screen, but they may have chat up or something, and you can see messages about the person you're communicating with, which is inappropriate as well. So we had to go through a lot of training on that.
I just saw a story about that today, where a young woman, and she's the VP of her company, but she is also drop dead gorgeous. I mean, one of those, and it was a new client meeting with her team and vendors. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And one of them accidentally shared their screen, and it was all about her. And as she put it, I'm not comfortable even saying what they were saying about me, but it was very unprofessional. And she called him out. She actually recorded it and then contacted him and said no. And it was just kind of one of those things where, they hit share screen. They didn't realize that their communication. And of course, it was 3 or 4 gentlemen. And I'll use that term very, no, they weren't.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you never know. And I've had that happen when not bad stuff. Like when I'm doing public speaking, I will go to share my screen because I'm talking frequently about social media. And somebody will ask a question and I'll say, well, hey, let me go in and show you what it looks like on LinkedIn. Okay, it's okay to share LinkedIn. Probably there's not going to be anything there, but I've shared Facebook where I'm like, okay, nope.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, you just, and then kind of a little bit of the opposite is true. The cat wandering through, the dog barking, the kids, we're all used to that now, right? And it's not a huge deal. So people shouldn't get real stressed out over the fact that their cat is going to stroll. Now, if the cat stands in front of the camera and all, no, but and I've had some really funny moments happen on this program with cats and kids, and I leave them in. That's part of human, and it helps us to kind of build that camaraderie with people.
Yeah, about sharing the screen, like one of the things we had to focus on is like you mentioned, sharing the whole screen. But instead of sharing the whole screen, share a specific application so you don't have those accidents happen. And then something we had to be aware of, if like you share Adobe Acrobat Reader and you've got like 17 PDFs open, and each of those PDFs has the name of another client, you may want to close all those. Only sharing one. Yeah, exactly. Right. There's a lot of things to consider from a security perspective with sharing your screen.
Right. Most definitely. So in your book, and again, it is called The Smartest Person in the Room, you talk about dealing, I mean, as you said, you wrote this for people dealing with high-tech cybersecurity, how to increase their EQ. But of course, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, no, good for everybody. This is good for everybody. Because it is about improving how you work with people. This is kind of the shortest way to put it. So you talk about the secure methodology, and it has 7 steps. And I love all of this because as I was reading this, part of the steps I'm thinking, well, duh. And then it's like, but we forget the well does a lot of times. But
Right.
talk to us about what is the secure methodology.
Yeah, the well does is is important. I think common sense is not always common practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the secure methodology is 7 steps I came up with to help. It provides a framework to develop somebody's emotional intelligence. Because a lot of people think, well, where do I start?
Right.
And my 7 steps kind of take them through a framework. It's, there's other frameworks out there. It's not the only one, but it is a framework that I found based on my experience works. The first step is awareness. I think a lot of us don't have the awareness, and this starts with self-awareness. A lot of us are aware of other people, but we're not really aware of
we
our
don't
own
realize
actions.
that we're off-putting or talking down to people or
Right. And I talk about neurolinguistic programming quite a bit in the book. And from an awareness perspective, one of the things we need to consider is we have these neural pathways in our brain, which are typically a behavior. And if we notice a trigger, our brain has a trigger or a stimulus, then we automatically run this program without really knowing it.
Right.
We find ourselves in this argument with somebody, for instance, and we're like, how did I get to this point? And that's because we automatically ran a program in our brain. And it's important from an awareness perspective to be able to stop that program that's not serving you and run a new program. And that new program or new behavior will start out as a weak neural pathway, but just like, your arm, if you exercise it, it will get stronger the more you run it. And the old behavior will get weaker. And pretty soon you'll have a new default behavior to a trigger. And this takes, a while to do. It's a simple concept, but it's not easy. So that's from that's step 1, awareness.
Right.
Step 2 is mindset. Carol Dweck wrote a book about mindset and basically talks about 2 different types of mindset. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A growth mindset means you believe your brain is not hardwired, that you can learn new things. A lot of people think that with a fixed mindset, think they can't learn anything new, that the brain is hardwired.
Right.
In my industry, I'll hear a lot of people say, I'm just not good with people. That's an example of a fixed mindset.
Right. I can't remember people's names.
Yeah, that's another example. Exactly. If you have a growth mindset, you realize, maybe I'm not so good with people right now, but I can certainly get better. Just like I didn't know how to program in C++ a year ago, but I learned it, right? It's the same concept. And from my perspective, if you say you're just not good with people, you probably have parents, you may have a spouse, you may have children, you may work with people. So why not get good with people? Because for me, that's more of an infinite skill set. It doesn't expire, whereas a technical skill set, like a programming language, will become obsolete in a couple of years, probably.
Right. And when we say, I can't change that, well, all you have to do is look at someone who, say, had a stroke or an injury or something and had to literally rewire their brains. And or even just something as simple as, I had a friend who broke her right arm. So there for a while, she had to do stuff with her left arm because the right one was in a cast. Our brains will adapt and make those changes, but it's hard, and takes practice. And as you said, the big thing is we have to be aware of it. And then we have to recognize, hey, we can change this.
Right. And we also have to realize, which is my last step of the methodology, that change takes time, especially if you're starting from fresh. You may have to unlearn some things. And we seem to have forgotten that as adults, because as toddlers, we learned to walk and we fell down all the time.
Right. We didn't run the very first thing.
Yeah. And imagine if we just gave up the first time we fell down, we'd still be crawling as adults, but we somehow persevered. And it's the same thing with learning people skills. We may not get it right the first time, but it takes practice. And then step 3 of my methodology is acknowledgement. One of the things I realized as a leader is I didn't acknowledge myself. And if I didn't acknowledge myself, I was going to have a hard time acknowledging my staff. And I remember finishing the Ironman World Championship in 2015, which is a 10-year journey for me to get there. And immediately after I finished, I was thinking, what's the next thing I want to accomplish? I never took one moment to like acknowledge myself. And I realized that I wasn't acknowledging my staff because of that. And I think it's important that we acknowledge the behavior we want more of versus the behavior we want less of. I always remember this study where they had these 2 signs, and there's a wet floor, and one of the signs said, caution, wet floor, don't slip. The other sign said, caution, wet floor, walk carefully. And the sign that said, caution, wet floor, walk carefully resulted in less people slipping because we were pointing out the behavior we want more of. So that's acknowledgement. And also people, not everyone likes to be acknowledged the same way you do. So it's sort of like the 5 love languages. It's important you acknowledge somebody in the way that they prefer to be acknowledged, which is often different than your way.
Right. Well, and as I was reading that part, I thought about an example that I had with a client where I was sending out emails that said, don't forget to register. And she said, switch that around to, remember, it's time to register. And it made a difference. We did get more people who registered. And it was really funny how just turning it into that positive and suggesting what we wanted them to do as to reminding them what not to do was the switch.
Exactly. And then step 4 is communication. Communication is a massive topic, but as I mentioned before, I believe that the meaning of communication is response you get. A lot of people in cybersecurity complain that they didn't get a budget, they don't get this, they don't get that, but it's often because they're not communicating in a way that the message is received by the board of directors, by their management, by whoever. So it's important to shift the ownership of communication back to you, rather than complain that somebody just doesn't get it. It's up to you to make sure they get it if it's an important matter.
Right. Yeah. If they didn't understand, it's not their fault.
That's right. Then the next step is monotasking. So monotasking is the opposite.
I love
of
this step because, oh my gosh, we're all guilty of this one, right?
Right. And multitasking to me is like a red flag. So somebody puts, they're an expert multitasker on their LinkedIn profile or something, they're on a job, on a resume. I'm probably not going to hire them because I realize they're probably really busy, but not very productive. So monotasking is concentrated focus on one task at hand for an increment. It could be like 50 minutes. Some people like to talk about the Pomodoro technique. That's basically monotasking for a short increment. But you can get way more done from a productivity standpoint if you monotask than if you're constantly being bombarded by emails, by text, and everybody else's demands. Because when you switch back and forth, you're context switching, which means you're often mixing up information. You have to remember where you left off on a specific task. So monotasking means focusing on one thing, shutting off everything else, and just doing that one thing.
Right. And in your book, you talk about block time. Where you're saying, okay, for this 50 minutes, I will do X. I'm not going to check email. I'm not going to look at Facebook. I'm going to give myself a break at the end to get up and walk around, but I'm going to do just this one thing for that 50-minute time period.
Right, because in 50 minutes, it's unlikely there's going to be an emergency, because a lot of people like to argue, well, I might get a message I have to respond to. And if you think back over the past 3 years, how many messages do you get where you had to respond to in a 50-minute window? Probably not too many. And the other reason for monotasking is presence, because if you're monotasking and you're with somebody, like in a meeting or at dinner, you're present. And if you're present, you're going to be a better communicator because you are going to pick up on on that body language and actually listen to what they're saying versus just going to passively listen. And it's surprising today how many people don't monotask, especially like in interpersonal matters, because you'll be, if I'm at dinner, I don't, with my girlfriend, for instance, I don't have my cell phone out. We're just having a dinner together. But a lot of people will be at the table. Both of them will be on their cell
They'll
phones.
They'll both be on their phones. And I'm guilty of that.
It's like, why are they even at dinner together? They're not even like communicating or having a moment, So the monotasking helps with that as well. And step 6 is empathy, which I think is extremely important today because there's so much focus on how we're all different. There's this camp and that camp, and we all always focus on how we're different. And I think if we see each other as different versus we all have the human condition in common, it's difficult to be empathetic. And empathy seems to have gone away today because there is so much focus on division versus unity. And in the book, I talk about, as a leader, you want to have high cognitive empathy and low affective empathy. High cognitive means you can take somebody's perspective and understand, you can put yourself in their shoes, their model of the world. And low affective means you feel the same way somebody else feels. You don't need to necessarily feel the same way they feel, but you want to have an understanding of how they feel. So when you're talking to the individual or dealing with a circumstance, you have a better way you're more equipped to handle it, basically.
Right. Well, and we're not saying you have to change and be what they're doing. It's just you have to understand what's going on with them.
Exactly. And that's much easier if you look at all of us as humans that all have similarities, and we have similar challenges with relationships, finances, pretty much everything. So we need to look at our similarities versus our differences. And then step 7 is Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word that means continuous and never-ending improvement. So with any of the steps that I went through, the 6 steps before, it's important to realize you're not going to be an expert with awareness, with a growth mindset, with anything, with communication. So it's important that you make incremental improvements. And if you adopt that mindset of, I'm going to take the first step, and it may not be 100% right, but I'm going to continuously improve, then that's what the Kaizen mindset is. And that's what Kaizen's about, the philosophy. And it also gives you the courage to start, because a lot of people seem to think that if they don't learn people skills like in 1 minute or one interaction, they're going to give up.
Right.
But it's a practice. And as long as you keep at it and keep improving, and in fact, you may have to unlearn some stuff you've already learned. So you may get worse at first, but as long as you have that mindset of mind that it's a journey, it's not like a light switch you just flip on and learn everything and it's automatically downloaded to you like the Matrix or something. As long as you realize it's an incremental journey, that often gives you the courage to start something. And that's Kaizen. And it's important to also continuously improve as a company or anything else so you can serve your clients better and serve your employees better as well.
Right. Yeah, we always hear the companies that if somebody says, well, why do we do it this way? And somebody says, because it's the way we've always done it. No. Now that might still be working. Let's be honest, might still be, but it might also be time for a change. And so just because that's the way you've always done it, doesn't mean that's the way you still should continue doing it.
Yeah, 100%. That's a weak answer to the question.
Right.
Yes.
Well, as I said, Christian, I think the important thing about your book is it is not just about how to deal with those technical people and how to improve them. Anybody who's working with a team or even yourself, I mean, you can go through all of this and realize, okay, I need to be better with the acknowledgement. Obviously, the Kaizen, that is something we should always be doing. We have got to always be improving and learning and things like that. And I think, if you're dealing with programmers, clearly they have to be improving their technical skills because things change very rapidly. So they also, and everyone needs to be improving their emotional skills because we're all going to work better together the more we do that. Well, oh my gosh,
100%.
this
Yeah.
hour has
Yeah.
just flown by. I love it. This has been so much fun. So tell people, though, how they find you and what are the services that you provide.
They can find me on my website. My personal website is christianespinosa.com. On there, I provide training on the secure methodology. I have a course on that. And I'm also working on my second book. And I provide coaching as well. For cybersecurity services, they can find me on my company, bluegoatcyber.com. There we provide HIPAA, which is healthcare, protecting electronic medical records. We provide risk analysis for that. We provide white hat hacking or penetration testing. We provide strategy, and then also medical device cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also on pretty much all social media as well. So they can just find me by searching for Christian Espinosa typically.
Great. I love it. Well, this really has been fascinating. And when you have your second book done, let us know and we'll have you on again.
Super.
But until then, what final thoughts do you have for everyone?
I think one of the quotes that always comes to mind when people ask me this question is, I think it's Oprah Winfrey's quote that turn your wounds into wisdom. And there's a lot to unpack in that, but we often think we've had these traumatic things happen to us and we assign a meaning to them that doesn't really serve us. So I'm a believer that life has no meaning. So if we have something traumatic that happens to us, we can assign a meaning that serves us versus one that holds us back. And I think that's important to remember, that we sort of make up our own destiny, our own reality, and we have the power to choose what something means to us.
I love it. So much fun, so much fun. Well, I've been having just the best conversation with Christian Espinosa, the best-selling author of The Smartest Person in the Room and the founder of Blue Goat Cyber. I almost said white goat. Blue Goat Cyber. You can tell I'm from Colorado, right? So Blue Goat Cyber. And until next time, I'm Deb Creer. Everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.